Okay, everyone. Well, thank you so much for coming out for this final round of UVU's inaugural Women in Leadership Collegiate Case Competition. So those of you who might be joining us for the first time, your first engagement with this competition, allow me to tell you where we are at in this process. Yesterday, we had 13 teams join us at UVU from universities across the country as well as Canada to come and compete in this case competition. It's a case that deals with Instagram and social media, some of the algorithms, and its impact on women in particular, but society overall in terms of mental health and other issues. Last night, the teams competed in their first round, which was kind of a rapid fire Q&A session. And based on that, they then moved on to, all teams moved on to the second round, which was a 20-minute presentation. The scores from round 1 and 2 were weighted equally, and a bracket winner emerged from 3 brackets. So we now have 3 finalists who are coming into this session here. And as they come into this session, this is a clean slate. So it doesn't matter, what their scores were in round 1 and round 2. They're coming in with a fresh slate, and we will then have our final placements for the competition overall. Our finalists that will be presenting today are Elon University, University of Arizona, and Stetson University. With that being said, we are going to start with Elon University. And so I would invite Colin and Charlotte to come on down, and I will explain how the timing process will work. Okay. So coming into this round, we will now have Elon University presenting, and these students will have 10 minutes to present. We have a timekeeper, Megan, here in the front row, who will be monitoring time for us. Presenters, Megan will provide you a 3-minute, a 1-minute, and a 30-second time warning, so you know where you are at. And if you are talking after that time has expired, we will interrupt you in the interest of time. Following the presentation, our head judge, Mel Lane here, will ask one question. You will then have 15 seconds that you can huddle together, compose your response, and then deliver your response in 1 minute to the audience. And then we will ask you to leave the room as we bring in the next team who will then present. So any questions before we begin? Yes, I'm going to hand this one over. You will have a mic, and Colin, if you're going to be on that end, when we get to the judge's question portion, if you could just hand the mic over to Mel to ask the question.
Hi guys, so we are presenting Instagram Kids Are Not Commodities, and I'm Charlotte Zell.
And I'm Colin Gleason.
Yeah, so to start us off, we wanted to focus on both the positive and the negative aspects of Instagram as a social media platform. Over here on your left, we have a story about Mari Kopany. She raises awareness for positive causes that are impacting Instagram.
And then on the other side of the story, we have what you hear about in the news is all the negative impacts, such as depression, anxiety, self-harm, and body issues that are prevalent over these platforms.
Yeah, so we also talked about the impact of whistleblowers, and here we have Frances Haugen's testimony, which was how that Instagram is the leading platform on social media that is causing these negative impacts, especially with youth in the mental health department. Yeah, and so here we have the main question of how can Meta minimize the negative impacts affecting young Instagram users, and leading into that, what will be the consequences of failing to minimize that? So here we see the recent surveys confirming the negative impacts of social media in the mental health area. And here you can see that nearly 4 in 10 Americans are wanting to take breaks on the social media app because of those negative impacts. And that number could be much lower, if not even 0. And here you can see on this end that Instagram is the leading. It has the most net negative impact on that mental health aspect compared to the other platforms. And here it shows the statistics for how it affects specifically women. More specifically, the negative social comparison aspects, the negative mental health are represented in these 4 categories the most, but they're not limited to just those. In addition to this, user trust in Instagram and Facebook is also declining. On this graph here, you can see that Instagram is declining the most in recent years. For the ethical considerations, we wanted to talk about the internal stakeholders, more specifically the key Meta and Instagram executives. This is really important because it's a social media platform. They're all connected. There's this aspect of what brings that together. And that leads into our external stakeholders, more specifically the minors who are using Instagram. Here you can see a graph connecting the power that these stakeholders have as connected to their impact. And if you look in that top box there, we kind of see those Instagram users and especially children as well as the key Meta Instagram executives. Yeah. So in terms of the utilitarian lens, we have, we want to select recommendations that will achieve the greatest overall common good in all the key stakeholders for the external and the internal. We also wanted to focus on the duty standpoint to make sure that these recommendations fulfill that moral imperative. How would society be better off? How is this influencing the people, not just the profit? And then for that virtue standpoint, we also want to choose the recommendations that will talk about both those people and the profit and not just focus on one.
From a legal perspective, we have acts and reforms that are currently being put in place. 2 specific ones being the COPA and SEPA Act that are already enforced and present in our country. The KIDS Act is coming up the rear, kind of basing it off the precedents that these 2 other acts have set. And these rules and regulations will be enforced by federal agencies such as the FTC and the FCC. From a state level, we have California being the leader in the United States currently, with their act being signed into law in September of 2022. And then as you see on my right and your left, other states that are coming up, riding the coattails and doing similar reforms as well. On a state level, these will be enforced by attorney generals and other representatives from the state. And then on an international scale, you can see that Europe and the UK is currently the leader in these reforms and protecting the young adults using the social media platforms. Asia and the Eastern countries are currently, secondary to the UK, but definitely above the US, and they're trying to, implement these regulations and protect their young ones as well. And then we would hopefully see these protections specifically in minors, and as well as punitive and penalty damages, which Instagram has already paid over $400 million to date. And if they do not comply with these new regulations coming down the line, that will only continue to rise. This is just a graph or a depiction of showing what countries are kind of joining on board or already working to create these regulations. We also have the whistleblower aspect, which has become way more prevalent in the past few years, specifically because of programs such as Whistleblower Aid, which will not only incentivize and cover the legal costs of these whistleblowers, but they will actually reward them for any ethical issues that they can report on these companies. This makes it way more prevalent to follow these regulations, as internal people working for you will now blow any whistle and report you for any bad practice. And then from a financial standpoint, you can see after September 2021, when this story first broke from Haugen's reports, how Facebook's stock price dove from nearly $400 to less than $150 in a few years. Partially because of macro events, as we've dealt with the pandemic and residual effects, but you can also see the black line has dived steeply compared to the markets such as the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ. So this brings us to our proposed solution to the problem. And if we can draw your attention to the revenue streams, because we are still dealing with a business who focuses on the financials. Currently, their 2 main revenue streams are virtual advertising and their selling aspects, such as the Instagram shopping feature. We propose that these regulations will obviously affect their financials in a negative way. They should implement a 3rd and or more revenue stream, such as a premium subscription base that we suppose could not only authenticate the age of the minors, but also remove ads if people wanted to pay for that. And this graph just shows the current revenues from both Facebook, the parent company, and how Instagram has actually exceeded their ad revenues in the recent years, and how that will, again, negatively or become less after these regulations, but will hopefully be compensated by new features such as premium subscriptions or other features that will hopefully, not only improve the ethical and platform environment, like the social aspects, but the financial part as well, because we still want to consider the business side of it. And this brings us to Instagram's claim to fame, which was their influencer base. Most of their other ideas, such as stories and reels, have been kind of copied from other platforms, although successful. Their influencers have been their primary goal and pusher of, eyes, advertisement, and money. We would like to propose, instead of just influencing these young adults who are obviously already kind of prone to being, moved around and manipulated, to move to a more smaller scale includer base, such as Marion that we talked about in the beginning of the slides, who are pushing positive causes and messages rather than just comparing each other to, lavish lifestyles that are unrealistic and or unobtainable for most. And that's the financial conundrum. How can we still focus and be a business who wants to be profitable and make money without negatively impacting their platforms, their social, cues, social groups, I should say, and focus more on affinity groups and positive change in the platforms? So our key recommendations will definitely focus around mental health and monitoring prompts. We suppose we could use the new AI wave that's come around recently to maybe take away some of the human work that needs to be done of filtering and tailoring some of the posts to these users. Next, privacy and decency, which will hopefully impact the trust that has been lacking in these platforms recently. So making it, settings defaults rather than hiding them behind the settings wall, which if you guys have ever explored some of these, they're very hard to find, if not searchable. Next, increase the user controls. Again, just tailoring the platforms to these users instead of just having a standardized, ad market campaign that seems to be the problem right now. And then finally, increase transparency where the sponsored posts and any, monetary incentives for what you actually see is blatantly apparent to every user, no matter age or, information apparent. And this is just the timeline of the certain implementations based on the categories. So here we have the mental health aspects and how most are going to take, medium to long-term, implementation plans. Next, we have the transparency, which again is very similar. And then finally, the privacy and controls, which can be a mixed bag. And finally, we'd like to bring it back to the two starting points of the good and bad of Instagram.
Yeah, so bringing it back to how all of those recommendations are going to focus on both influencing this to be more than it actually is, bringing a lot of attention to those more positive aspects rather than those negative that keep you on the app, as well as trying to address and minimize the potential health impacts and privacy harms, especially for kids and young women.
Yep. That is all. Thank you very much.
Okay, you ready for your question? What is the role of leadership character in preventing and solving dilemmas like this one outlined in the case?
So the role in leadership could be seen from two different perspectives. Obviously, we see Haugen being the leader in the whistleblower aspect, where she not only, was able to gain all these reports, but did it in the right way to make sure her evidence was backed up and solid, where there could be no discussion on Facebook's, malicious or negligent acts. From a different perspective of the executives working at these companies, leadership should be shown in getting ahead of the game and conforming to the most rigorous regulations that are coming out, as they will not continue to just make these quick fix band-aids that they've been doing in the past. So again, either showing leadership and showing or exposing malpractice or bad intentions, as well as those people running the company should get ahead of the game, making sure that everyone is safe from the get-go instead of, coming up the rear and trying to fix it after the fact.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. We appreciate that. Congratulations, Elon, to making it to the finals. And we will now have one of our student liaisons bring in our next team, which is the University of Arizona. Okay, so we are now ready for our second finalist, the University of Arizona. Kayla and Devin, congratulations on making it to the finals. I'll explain the time process and then we'll get started. So we are now beginning this final round with the University of Arizona. You will have 10 minutes to deliver your presentation. We will have our timekeeper, Megan, over there in the corner. She'll watch time for us, and she will provide a 3-minute, a 1-minute, and a 30-second warning by displaying time cards. If by chance you are still talking after your time has expired, we will interrupt you in the interest of time. Following the presentation, our head judge, Mel Lane, will ask one follow-up question. At that point in time, you then will have 15 seconds to huddle and compose your response, and then turn around and deliver that response to the audience. Kayla, since you will be on this side, we would ask that when we get to that question portion, if you will please hand over your microphone to Mel so that she can ask that question and the audience can hear. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. All righty. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We thank you for your time, and we are excited to present our proposal of Instagram, put your money where your meta is, and in an attempt to better the social responsibility initiatives at Meta. My name is Kayla Salazar. My partner is Devin Nelson, and we will serve as your content creators / ethical consultants for the day. In terms of today's feed, the rundown is we'll briefly go over the challenge and objective, the background of the case, importance of corporate social responsibility, our recommendations that are meant to improve the social practices of Meta, which are funding third-party research, educating internally and externally on unconscious bias, and then a corporate shakeup to the governance of Meta. Finally, we will go over timeline and budget, and then a refresher to put your money where your Meta is. The challenge is that Meta and Instagram have faced multiple ethical, legal, social, and leadership issues in regards to the way they've acted towards mental health and the issues alike. And the objective today is to fulfill Meta's mission of building community and bringing people together through social practices with the input of female leaders across the country. Basically, Meta repeatedly chose to optimize for its own interests instead of putting the safety and mental health of their users first. This is a direct quote from Frances Haugen, which was the whistleblower in 2021. They released documents that displayed that Facebook had research that demonstrated that Instagram caused mental health issues, and however, they chose to not act on it until it was made public, which they then had the Kids Act reinstated and features that were installed into Instagram, like the Take a Break feature that encouraged in an attempt to help mental health issues and help people go towards different content instead of the content they were previously at. We will now go over the impact or the people that this case impacts.
When we're looking at impact, we're looking towards the stakeholders of this case. Stakeholders are people or organizations who are impacted positively or negatively by events or actions that have taken place. For this case, we found 3 large stakeholders, the first being the users of Instagram and their mental health, and minors can also impact their parents in that regard. We then looked at the senior leadership of Meta and how their ethical conduct has been called into question. And finally, we looked at Instagram as a whole and their brand reputation, how they're perceived as a company. Our recommendations focus on corporate social responsibility, which is looking towards the corporate stakeholder. Corporate social responsibility is business self-regulation with social accountability and creating a positive impact on society, meaning that the corporation should care about the people rather than just putting money in their pocket. This is important for 3 large reasons. The first being it can attract and attain employees. It is also important to understand how it affects brand reputation, and it can help bring investors into the company. But corporate social responsibility is an investment. $20 billion is what a company of Meta's size should spend on corporate social responsibility annually. That is 17% of Meta's profit last year alone. This is really important as it can have lasting consequences as a company. It can also help reduce litigation and problems at the 150 lawsuits moving forward this year against Instagram in regards to mental health. Moving forward, we also need to look towards our 3-pronged plan to increase corporate social responsibility. This comes from funding third-party research, educating on unconscious bias, and a shakeup to the corporate governance structure. Let's start by examining third-party research. Meta has done research into how Instagram has affected mental health, but more research needs to be done into the subject. The problem is Meta can't do it. If with the reduced trust of Instagram, people will not buy this research and will not care about it. In order to fix this problem, we need to use a third party. To understand this, let's take the Mattel example. In the 1970s, Mattel faced a problem with lead paint on their toys, which posed safety risks to children. And they actually immediately started fixing the problem and brought in an internal auditor to look at the situation. However, since people didn't trust Mattel, the internal auditor meant nothing to them, and it had no impact. The way they fixed this was using a third party. For them, it was a non-government organization, or NGO, to do the auditing for them. This helped them regain trust and move forward as a company, which is what Meta needs to do. So our proposal is to partner with universities to give them the funds and our data to do research on this issue, to look at more data on mental health, as well as possible solutions to the problem. Studies of this kind can range anywhere from $15,000 to $100,000, but you're looking closer to the $100,000 range given the heavy data nature of this research. Now let's move in to education on unconscious bias.
Educating internally and externally, specifically on unconscious bias, is going to be incredibly crucial to the success of this plan and the success of incorporating these social practices into Meta. Specifically, unconscious bias is an issue that has been brought awareness to recently, but a lot of companies have adopted the conventional form of unconscious bias, which is more so a check it off the list, we got it done, we did it, let's move on to what else we need to go to towards profit. But conventional bias unconscious bias has not been working, and a study with over 490 studies and over 80,000 people have participated in these studies, and all of them have concluded that this form of bias is not working and it's not changing behaviors. Changing behaviors is what's really going to make an impact within Instagram, and which then they can, contribute to society in a more helpful manner. We propose effective unconscious bias training, which does more than simply raise awareness, but it helps change behaviors. It's supposed to teach people to manage their biases, help them counteract the stereotypes that are embedded into them because of the way people have been trained up to have these gender biases, socioeconomic biases, different biases that have been instilled in us because of the way the system is. And the biggest thing about this is that it's not just a one-time, one-and-done deal. It's an ongoing commitment to knowledge, to growth, and to society for the overall betterment of the children that we have using these social media platform apps, and in general, within the company. If we can uproot that and better our unconscious bias and have less biases, that's gonna change the way Instagram is structured entirely. Effective unconscious bias will mainly reflect in AI algorithms. Why? Because AI algorithms are created by humans. And if humans have certain biases, those biases will then lead into the algorithm. And the algorithm, for example, if somebody is researching beautiful women, a young girl wants to look like these beautiful women, they should be able to click on profiles that display top executive women, powerful women that are in roles that aren't just models, but rather are also successful women in different areas of life. So educating Instagram data scientists and the AI engineers is going to make all the difference when it's reflected in the final AI algorithm, because those biases won't exist in them and they won't reflect in the algorithm. Educating is also going to be extremely important. 89% of people say that they trust the company more if they're willing to take accountability for their mistakes. Instagram has made mistakes, and if they're willing to acknowledge them and rectify them, then people will acknowledge that, and they will jump on board if they know that the company is trying. We will now go into corporate governance.
Corporate governance is the structure and organization of a company. To understand this, let's start by looking at the Meta Board of Directors. The Meta Board of Directors is actually very representative of women, with a 4-5 split. This is important as women are found to be more conscientious in the workplace, meaning they care more about the work and how it happens, and they're also found to care more about if their company is making a positive impact on society. However, Meta senior leadership is not as representative, with a 5-2 split. So all of those positive impacts I just talked about aren't being seen in the people who run your day-to-day operations and truly have an impact with the company, which is just one facet of CSR that needs to be addressed. The other part of corporate governance that needs to be looked at is the non-cementation of CSR within the company. Last October, Meta disbanded their responsible innovation team, which was in charge of keeping ethics in the workplace. So our proposal is the Meta Department of Corporate Social Responsibility, headed by the Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer. This role already exists within Meta, but placing them as the top of this department will allow them to have power within senior management, as well as delegating to the board and have ethics cemented in the company going forward. Now that we've understood all 3 prongs of our plan, let's move into a budget breakdown.
In terms of budget, we previously forecasted a $20 billion budget. That's including all CSR initiatives, which includes anti-bullying, sustainability efforts. This is simply what's targeted towards this three-pronged recommendation. It is $8.041 billion, with the majority of it going to unconscious bias training, because at the end of the day, change behavior is gonna make the most change, and it costs, and it's an investment that Meta should be willing to make, because the cost of not doing so is much greater. It's gonna impact society in a much larger negative way. And so this is why this is the proposal for the projected budget. Obviously, the other parts are also important with the Department of Corporate Social Responsibility, third-party research funding, and Chief Ethics Officer. In terms of implementation, the president is announcing these changes, then developing the roles, implementing them, the rollout, and final plan should be set in stone by 2025 with a new department, people in Meta being enrolled in ongoing unconscious bias training, et cetera. And now we will emphasize the importance of
putting your money where your meta is. Today, we talked about the importance of corporate social responsibility and how this will help Instagram regain trust, improve ethical practices for the future, and set them up as an industry leader in terms of taking social action to impact their users in a positive manner. But this is an investment, a $20 billion investment annually in corporate social responsibility. But this can have lasting positive impacts that Instagram needs to make, which is why we urge you to put your money where your meta is.
All right. What is the role of leadership character in preventing and solving dilemmas like the one outlined in this case?
When looking towards leadership character and their role within this situation, we look towards decision-making and caring about profit versus people. In this situation, they decided to prioritize profit over their people. And we feel that leaders and leadership character needs to be shifted more towards caring about their people, because that will impose long-term profit to the company, because people will value the company even greater, which is why we also brought up the unconscious bias, because that will help improve leadership character and the decision-making going forward, so that situations like this can't happen again, because our leaders are receiving that training and having a more strong mental character and being ready to take on challenges in a new perspective.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kayla and Devin, and congratulations again. So we'll allow our judges just a minute or so to capture their thoughts, and then we will bring in the next team. Okay, so now we will begin our final session with our team from Stetson University. Sadie and Audrey, congratulations on making it to the finals. I'll explain the time process and then we'll get started. So you will have 10 minutes to deliver your presentation. Megan will be our timekeeper. She's over there in the corner, and she will provide a 3-minute, a 1-minute, and a 30-second warning for you using those color-coded cards. If you are still talking after time has expired, we will interrupt you in the interest of time. And following the presentation, our head judge, Mel Lane, right here, she will ask one follow-up question. At that point, you are permitted to huddle together for 15 seconds to compose your response, and then we'll turn around to deliver that response to the audience. Sadie, since you'll be on this side, we'll ask that when we get to that question portion, if you will please share your microphone with Mel so that all can hear that question. And so with that, we are ready for Stetson University.
Thank you. Good morning, Instagram and Meta executives. My name is Sadie Jensen. And we are college students, we are women, we are Instagram users ourselves, and we are consultants here at Division I College Consulting Group, and we are here today to help Instagram address some issues that it's been having. So on the screen behind me, you can see some unfiltered highlights about Instagram that have been in the news lately. A big problem has been the impact that Instagram has been having on mental health for users, body image, things like that. However, as I mentioned, Audrey and I are both very avid Instagram users. We love the platform. And so we can vouch for it that Instagram's not inherently dangerous, toxic, bad, any of that stuff. In fact, Instagram's good for a lot of things, and so are the platforms like it. Marketing, connection, creativity, activism, social belonging, brand engagement. These are just a few of the tools that Instagram has to offer our society. And so we think that Instagram has the power to be a wonderful tool for good if we can just tweak some of these problems with solutions you already have here in your company. So today we're going to go through our solutions for you here at Instagram. We'll have a brief overview of the issue by my friend Audrey. Then we'll go through our strategy that we call our RACE plan for a safer web, that stands for retain, amplify, censor, and educate. And then we'll kind of throughout that tie in our social, financial, and legal impacts of implementation of that here at Instagram before we give you time to ask us some questions. Audrey?
Thank you, Sadie. Now, we're all here today because we understand that Instagram is facing many issues and understanding how to address mental health on the platform. Now, when thinking about this, we encourage you to picture imperfect, both in the workplace and on the platform. Within the workplace, we want you to acknowledge the harm that the platform is creating for its users when it comes to mental health. And we understand that your priority is to create a fun, productive space for users to interact with. However, you can't do this unless you're protecting your stakeholders. So we encourage you to acknowledge the issues that are happening on your platform, because acknowledgement is the first step towards action. And secondly, on the platform, we encourage you to create a community that does not profit from perfection, but instead encourages users to post imperfections. While social media currently, specifically Instagram, relies on this idea of social hierarchy, perfectionism, and competition, we encourage you to expel that narrative and to encourage users to post real stories from their lives. Because we believe that if you make Instagram a place where real life happens, it's going to be much better than it just being a space where the highlights or the best moments from your life are being posted.
Definitely. Thank you, Audrey. So our solution to help you achieve this wonderful picture of imperfect that Audrey described is called our RACE strategy. As I mentioned earlier, that stands for retain, amplify, censor, and educate. Let's dive a little bit more into each of these letters. So the first one is retain, but before we can retain, we have to return. You'll notice the slide does not say retain because we want to return first to the original culture that Instagram was founded on and then retain the positive aspects of that into the future. So when Instagram was founded by Mike Krieger and Kevin Systrom, they made it a priority to really make a culture of kindness present in their community on the app. They actually used to sit down, the two of them, on their MacBooks and individually delete every single negative comment that came up on the web. Instagram's grown a lot, and two men with MacBooks can no longer handle the enormous task that is saving the internet. So instead, we encourage Instagram to just kind of retain what they can from that culture, and that is the people first narrative, the community first narrative, and carry that into the future. Instagram states that it's their responsibility to foster a safe and supportive community for everyone, and we believe that if you want to gain the trust of your stakeholders, which, let's be honest, that's why you called us here today, you have to return to that culture of kindness and retain it into the future. Next, we're going to move into amplification. The A stands for amplify, which we're going to explore in two realms. The first part of amplification is amplifying positive content that's already on the platform. So we have seen this before with when Kevin Systrom in 2017 used to really work to have AI boost positive comments to the top of comment sections. And this is in an effort to take advantage of what's called the mimicry effect. The mimicry effect holds that when people see positive engagements online, they're more likely to leave a positive interaction themselves. I can speak to this personally. If I see a bunch of girls commenting on someone's post like, yes, queen, you look so beautiful, I'm more likely to be like, yes, girl, tear it up, you look amazing. And because we love to support each other when we see other people doing that, kind of the monkey see, monkey do thing, but the positive side of that. And we believe that that will build a sense of community through amplifying it. And the thing about Instagram too is that the idea of it is to have engagement with your platform. That's the ultimate goal. And so if we're rewarding people who post positive content with more exposure, we're going to send a signal to our competitors, to our users, that we are a community-first platform.
One aspect I would like to actually acknowledge and commemorate Instagram for is that you have been very good about bringing diversity into your employees. Currently, the women comprise 44% of your employees and minorities make up 49%. And while this is very great, we would like to see you increase this diversity into roles of leadership. Currently on the board of directors, women only make up 33%. And we know that this sometimes can be tricky to figure out how exactly to do, but we know that Instagram should make this a priority because by including these voices in the narrative, you can have these people that are most impacted by the mental health issues that we're going to be talking about. Sadie's going to grow into this more. That can help you find solutions to these problems that we're talking about today.
Absolutely. Now, the C stands for censor. So censorship is something that's a little bit touchy. We talked about an amplification, how we want to use AI to really amplify positive comments. We have the same idea here where we want to use censorship to kind of filter out things that go against our community guidelines. Instagram's been doing this for a while with a program called Deep Text, but since 2016 when this was implemented, technology has only grown. So we really want to see Instagram be a first mover and hop on these new technologies as they become available. It may be expensive at first, but the ROI is unmatched when you see the engagement that your platform will receive, and engagement brings in money here at Instagram. But we do encourage you to proceed and censor with caution. Instagram was founded on a principle of creative expression, so we don't want to get us so into the weeds and censor so much that we actually scare away our main demographic. There's one more thing I want to make sure you understand with censorship and be careful with. And that's that we want to make sure we're censoring equitably. AI is nothing but machine learning, and because of that, it can tend to have biases that maybe aren't present in Instagram itself. We don't believe that Instagram has any inherent biases towards any group of people, but AI can sometimes adopt these unintentionally. And I'm going to share a quick story with you about that. This person on the screen behind me is Shira Ravindran. They are an artist, activist, and influencer on Instagram. Now, Instagram's community guidelines hold that we're not allowed to have nudity on the app. Good. But they allow nudity in cases of protest, health, and like mothers giving birth and things like that. The issue is that we don't have a definition that's clear-cut here for protest. So Shira posted on a trend that was going against Eurocentric beauty standards, a protest post where they were topless, but their breasts were covered, there was no actual nudity. Long story short, the AI took it down because it violated sexual activity guidelines. And so the AI unintentionally, with some inherent bias, took down some protest posts and sexualized it, which made Shira feel invalidated. And it also took down posts that let younger demographics on the app feel represented, because a lot of trends, the people in this trend that participated still remain, and they're skinny white women. And so if you don't fit that body type, it's almost as if Instagram is saying unintentionally, your body is invalid. And that's not what we want to see happening. So we want Instagram to invest responsibly in AI models that take into account intersectionality and inclusion to make diversity cool again on the web.
So the E in RACE stands for educate, and this is an extremely important component because it has been found through studies that informing users of the negative influences of social media can actually mitigate them. So if I'm scrolling on my phone and I'm suddenly headed in a downward spiral, if I saw an Instagram campaign that told me and informed me about the negative side effects, such as through negative side effects of looking at certain content, I can identify that and be mindful and maybe kind of deconstruct what is happening when I'm looking on Instagram. So that can help protect users. Additionally, we believe that Instagram should educate by advertising on its coping strategies. Instagram has so many amazing features that it offers, such as the time limit feature, the highlight count feature, but ultimately users cannot use these if they don't know they exist, and additionally, if they don't know how to use them effectively. And so because of this, we challenge you to think of this as an opportunity, because this is your chance to set a standard for social media safety on your app and to be a first mover in creating standards.
So again, we want to remind you of our strategy that we want you to implement here at Instagram: retain, amplify, censor, educate, racing for a safer web. Instagram was founded to be a platform where people can be candid and share happy memories with each other. And we don't want a culture of imperfection to allow us to hyperfixate on our negative attributes, but instead become the wonderful community that we know it can be. Let's take off the filter of the internet. Let's make Instagram a happy, safe community again. Thank you.
What is the role of leadership character in preventing and solving dilemmas like the one outlined in this case?
Okay, so we, in this case, the big issue was that Instagram was aware of a lot of the problems that it was causing, but they weren't transparent with it, and they left it to kind of be discovered by a whistleblower, because as we know, humans love negative content. It's really easy to feed into, and so that negative content that was causing the mental health issues for teens that we mentioned in the case was actually bringing in money. And so this creates a conflict of interest where the leaders are faced with an ethical dilemma, and it's, okay, well, we're making money, but we're damaging society and we're damaging our demographic. We're not being able to retain them, right? And so it takes a very courageous leader, I believe, to be able to see the issues that are presented to you and be honest, like, hey, we messed up. It's gonna take some time, it's gonna take some money, it's gonna take some, maybe even a little bit of embarrassment, admitting that we are wrong to the public, but being that ethical leader and showing your competitors that you're not afraid to be wrong and just be a courageous leader.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Sadie and Audrey, and thank you all for attending this final session. So that was the last of our final 3 presentations. And at this point, we will have some time for our judges to deliberate. We will be wrapping up our competition event over in the Roots of Knowledge, and we invite you all to attend. So if you are not a judge, you are welcome to head over to our Roots of Knowledge gathering and get started with some good food and some company and drinks and a women's history scavenger hunt in our stained glass mural. And if you are a judge, I would ask that you follow me to room 114 so we have an opportunity to tabulate your scores. And then we will announce the winners as well as the bracket runners up over in Roots of Knowledge once we've had a chance to do that.